Okay, I'm live with my guest, Will. I'm going to have Will introduce himself, and then we're going to get into some talk on extreme sports and training the athletes. So, Will, the floor is yours, my friend.
Hey, Chris. Yeah. Thanks for having me on, man. I am a strength and conditioning coach based in Los Angeles right now. I spent the last 8 years in Major League Baseball with Kansas City and Cincinnati, and that's where you and I came across each other. And then back in 2022, I transitioned out of baseball into a completely different realm, something that allowed me to get back to home and have a little bit more of a work-life balance than I was having in baseball, even though I loved it. It was becoming a bit of a grind, and door number 3 opened. I took a look and liked what I saw. So here I am now.
Yeah, I've been trying with this podcast to not talk so much about professional baseball and like get outside of that box. But everybody that I've talked to that has any experience is like, I really needed the work life balance. Like I love baseball. I love working with the athletes. It's just so demanding. And you're in like a totally different environment now. But I would imagine that to some extent, your work with professional baseball players has helped you to transition to your new role. Fair to
No doubt.
say?
Very fair. The the experience of working in Major League Baseball is huge in that you work with so many different personalities, not only athletes, but coaches, front office. There's so many different parties involved in the development of the athlete and the team. You got to balance all of that. And then you got to adjust to the weather, to the travel, to the equipment, to the nutrition. All of that has made a huge difference in my experience, and really, I think, allows me to think on my feet very well.
Yeah, I think the personalities and the adaptability are probably the two biggest pieces of professional baseball that, like, regardless of where you go, what setting you're in, I think probably has some sort of transfer of like skill and like the ability to communicate with people. So let's kind of get into it. You're with some extreme sports athletes now. Like, what does that look like training wise? Like, in my mind, like I know how to train a baseball player, but I would have no idea how to train some of the people that you see in your like current experience. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, on a weekly basis, we are dealing with all the typical board sports: skating, surfing, snowboard, ski. We get some traditional sports like basketball and soccer, but then we're getting skydivers, bikers, downhill bikers, motocross, kayaking, fencing, and even some gamers. So really, it's the full gamut of everything that you can imagine being competitive. There's likely a chance that they're going to walk through the door at some point. And this has really pushed us as a performance and S&C staff to develop a process of going about figuring out how are we going to work with these athletes. So ideally, we get 2, 3, 4 days notice. That doesn't always happen before the athlete comes in. But if we do, we go through an entire needs analysis, and essentially we boil it down to find out what matters, measure what matters, and then try to change what matters. So it's all really just an information gathering process. We try to dive into the literature. Is there anything on this sport of how it's been trained traditionally? What's important for it? So, let's take surfing, for example. Uh, Dive into the research. Okay, we find that pull-up and dip strength tends to be very important for paddle speed. And paddle speed is important for carrying speed into dropping into a wave and making it cleanly. Okay, cool. So I know that. Now, is there any type of energy system need? Okay, yeah, that's a little bit murky. The research isn't as great. Okay, maybe let me talk to someone on staff who has a background in surfing or has worked with a lot of surfers. And then they might point me in a direction of, hey, so-and-so has trained surfers for 20 years. They're kind of a friend of the program. let me put you in contact. And so we're all just trying to like put all these pieces together before the athlete comes. And then they walk through the door. We'll sit down, figure out where they are in their season. Are they injured? Are they healthy? Do they have a training history? And then what are they hoping to get out of their experience here? Are we working on the mental side, competition prep, maybe some nutrition, or are we actually trying to make some positive adaptations in the gym? And if so, that's where we then go to our performance assessments. And we're doing all the standard ones, you know, your CMJs, we'll do some Nordics, we'll do some hip testing, but it really boils down to like what applies to that athlete in that sport. And we fit the tests around that.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I was wondering is like if the athlete comes to you and you maybe you only see them for a day or a couple days, like I would say the easiest way is probably to just check a box of like, oh, get a good workout and like get a sweat or like make them sore. But like the diving in and like almost trying to give them something to leave with, I think for me would probably be like the biggest thing that you could get for them, right? Is like if somebody comes in, you only see them for a couple days, like, hey, we noticed this, we think this can help you in whatever sport you're playing, like maybe you should continue to do this even when you leave. Is that kind of like a major goal if you only have them for a couple days at a time?
Definitely the goal. We'll call it like first time experience, like give them the first time experience. And at surface level, that sounds pretty easy, pretty cheesy. Just make sure they have a good time. But ultimately, if you want an elite athlete or any athlete really to come back, what do? You provide the value that they're not getting somewhere else. So we can make it fun and engaging, uh, while also showing them, hey, there are these things that if you improved would make you a better skateboarder, for example. And actually, here's a list of the top 30 skaters, and this is where you rank on it. And if you came back to us consistently, we could probably train to get you to a point where that would improve, which theoretically would help you improve on the skateboard.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. And I think, you and I have spoken other times just about this type of situation that you're in. And I've tried to wrap my head around just like if I didn't know a sport, like how would I handle connecting with those athletes? And then you add the layer of like, I may only have them for a day or two. Like, what are the really big rocks that I'm going to try to nail? Because, like I said, I think you and I, it's safe to say, like if a baseball player walks in, we know exactly what assessment we're going to do, what we're looking for, what limitations, how we can train them, what kind of stuff we're going to send them off with. But like I've never like jumped out of a plane. I've never like really gone. I've never gone surfing. I don't really like the ocean. It's a little terrifying to me. So it's like, how can I get a message across to somebody that I have nothing in common with, and still make it seem coherent and relevant to them and something that they're going to take away, and when they leave say, oh, this guy or girl really helped me and helped my career, and want them to come back. And I think you probably nailed it right on the head with that. It's probably fun too for you to just like dive into all of these new things that like I don't have experience with this, but I'd love to learn more, or like connect with people that in the baseball world you probably never would have connected with, a surf coach or a rock climbing coach, or you talked about like gamers. Like it's kind of cool that you get to just spend time with people that you wouldn't normally spend time with, and I would assume you're probably learning from them as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I did connect with someone's surf coach, and she lives in Hawaii and runs a gym out there. And the things that she was able to fill me in on, like overuse injuries, little aches and pains that most surfers get that maybe it's not in the research because it's not classified as a classic injury. Um, but it's just if you're around the culture, you're like, oh yeah, their necks hurt from being in extension all day, their low backs, their hamstrings get tight and shortened from being in an isometric hold on top of the board. It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Never really thought about that, but for sure. And so it's super cool, like just branching out, talking to Olympic committees, talking to maybe like just an average coach down the street who doesn't really have any certifications, but he's been around the sport his whole life. And now he's mentoring the younger kids. Like he's got his own breadth of knowledge that has some credence to it. And so it's really just taking bits and pieces from all these different people. Um, and at the end of the day, it's like I go back to the book Range, where like we have a staff where we have 3 or 4 strength coaches who have a breadth of knowledge that is like very deep in very specific sectors, but now we're growing that much wider. So we're a mile wide with all these different sports, but there's also other ones in there that are much deeper. And you can start putting together the similarities of each sport. And you're like, oh, you know what? I've seen a rock climber do that. Maybe that would be good for a surfer's shoulder. Or, I used this hip mobility in baseball. This could actually help one of my skaters or surfers help rotate their pelvis a little bit better. And so you start figuring out that there's only a certain number of ways that the human body moves and moves efficiently. And then you can just start picking and choosing exercises that you've seen other places and see if they apply.
Yeah, there's a couple of things here. So, like, first and foremost, for me, that's kind of what this podcast is. Like, obviously, the PBS CCS podcast before is just all baseball people, and like nothing to take away from it. I've just had conversations with people in baseball, and I just wanted to have conversations outside and like learn from other people and see what they're doing. And it doesn't necessarily have to be strength and conditioning. So that was kind of the whole point of this podcast for me. The second thing is you talk about like injuries that you wouldn't think of. Like my wife and I have been really getting into rock climbing lately, and one of the things that I hear all the time in the gym is like, my neck hurts. Like, and a lot of it is just like when you're belaying somebody and you're looking up at them, like your neck is cranked in this certain position for however long they're climbing, and then over time you're like, oh man, I kind of need to take care of my neck. And then the last thing is like, I've been posting my climbing videos, and I've had baseball people reaching out to me like, dude, I bet that would be great for baseball pitchers, and like connecting your feet to your hands, and like being able to move freely and use your mobility and like be strong in these positions. And I'm like, yeah, with a caveat, there are certain people like you probably have to progress to some of these things. Like, not that I'm a good climber, I'm not, but like there are probably some relevant points of like, yes, you have the upper body pulling strength. Two, like you have the grip strength. Three, like you're using your feet to move you up the wall while having your body in positions. Like there's definitely some crossover between the different sports. And I think for you, that's like, you have, like you said, really good knowledge in baseball, really good knowledge of how the body moves within the context of the sport of baseball. And then there's other people there that have that same context within whatever sport. And then they kind of overlap. And then all of a sudden it's like, I could train anybody within the context of anything, right? That's probably like what it seems like in your little group there.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've got a couple of coaches they have different backgrounds. So obviously I came from baseball, as you said, and Alex Bunt came from skiing. And then Fiona McPartland worked a long time at the English Institute of Sport in the UK, has a really good knowledge of rehab and how the body works on different levels. And then we have Robin Thorpe also, who worked in soccer in the UK for a long time. So, you put that all together, there's a lot of crossover, but there's also a lot of differences. And so that does allow us to really have strengths and weaknesses where we can build off one another.
Yeah, I think that's the fun thing. Like for spring training is you have all of your strength coaches together in the same office, but they all kind of come from different places. If at least in my experience, we have a guy on staff who's really big into sprint mechanics and speed training, and we have another guy who's really into sports science. We have, programming specialists, and like we all sit in the room within the context of baseball. And it's really good. Like it's really fun to talk specifically to your sport, but then conversely, I just like picture myself in this setting that you're talking about. And like, I don't know anything about training rock climbers, but I've been in the rock climbing gym. I've seen some of the stuff that they're doing. I'm uber impressed with how they train on the walls. And I'm like, I'm sure there's things I could learn from them that I could take to baseball. I'm sure there's things I could take from baseball to help with them. And like, before you know it, it's almost like you find a little niche, and like, who knows, 5 years down the road, you may be like the ultimate windsurfing strength coach or something. You never know. Like it's just the reality is everybody probably needs to train for something in some capacity, whether it's just quality of life or specifically a sport they're trying to train for. And like the people that know how the body moves and the body works, like ultimately can kind of just help whoever they can help. You know what I mean? And I think for you, it's from my perspective of like, you see 200 baseball players and they're all baseball players and they come in all shapes and sizes, but ultimately like they're trying to play baseball. Where for you, you may see one person from 90 sports or whatever. I don't know what, I'm just throwing numbers out, but like
Right.
it's cool to just be like, hey, you're a one of one in this place. Like I'm gonna try to help you, but we may make some mistakes. We may strike gold on something. I don't know, but like it's got to be cool to. And then the other thing is like when they go out to compete, I'm sure it's cool to just see them within whatever context of extreme sport they're competing in.
Yeah, and it is. And like a lot of what we do in our initial discussion with the athlete is figure out what type of athlete they are. So like for me, it's easy to keep using a skater as an example. Like, okay, are you a park skater, a vert skater? Um, are you good at rotations? Are you good at flipping the board? Like, do you ride backside, fakie a lot, switch? Like, what makes you you? And then what do you want to get better at? So is there something that you're not really good at right now? So I had a BMX kid last week and he's like, yeah, I'm good at flips, but I'm not good at spins. I can only spin well to my right side. Like, oh, perfect. Okay. Let's look at your thoracic rotation to the left or your hips. Is there a reason why you don't feel comfortable rotating that way? Um, but then also like a lot of these athletes are so untrained because they're more of the unorthodox sports. They haven't been training their whole life or coming up like a traditional team sport athlete. They just go out and do it. And so the fundamentals in the gym are huge. Just getting them to train consistently, at least 2 times a week, foundational movements, we can see huge improvements just doing that.
That was going to be my next question. Is like I talked to somebody about basketball, right? And like the basketball culture, maybe not nowadays, but like the the thought about basketball is like guys just go play the game and they don't really train. And like that's how they get better is they play more basketball, right? Like they're always playing pickup, this, that, or the other thing. And then I think about like skaters, like they just go out and skate, right? They're out at the park all day, they're out skating, whatever. And it's like, do you ever get pushback from people where like, nah, I don't really need to train. It's going to make me too bulky or too muscular, or I'm not going to be able to move as well. And like, how do you navigate that conversation with somebody there?
100% we get that. It feels almost like baseball did when I first got in,
Hmm.
where it was, oh no, pitchers don't lift. They can't get bulky. They don't do any upper body lifting. You're going to get tight. It's like, no, it's not true. If done correctly, that's totally not true.
Correct.
And so I think the best example I have was talking to a female wakeboarder, world champion. She's young, but she's getting older. And so we're talking about her off season, and she liked the training. She goes, "Oh yeah, yeah, that program sounds good. Probably could do it 3-4 days a week." She goes, "But when do you think I should do it? Because I'm still probably going to be on the water most days, and I don't want to be sore when I get on the water. I said, well, it's your off season, so it might be okay to actually learn to wakeboard when you're a little bit sore. And the look she gave me was like, absolutely not. Like, I'm not going to say anything, but there's no chance that I'm doing that because my sport takes priority. And it's almost playing the long game where you have to be like, okay, all right, yeah, like we'll try it out. If it doesn't work, like we'll see what happens. Because if you push them on it, you're going to lose them completely. So eventually, she came back around like a year later, and she started to realize, like, you're right. I do have to dedicate some time to physical development. If I'm actually going to get bigger, stronger, faster, more explosive, I can't do both at the same time.
It's one of the biggest fights I have, one of the strongest beliefs I have that I don't know if other people agree with is that like in the off season it's okay to like throw or hit or wakeboard or ice skate or whatever like a little bit sore because during the season, especially in baseball, like nobody's ever fresh ever. Even in April, like some guys are already beat up from spring training and it's like if you have that capacity to work when your body is a little bit beat up, if there is a day where you feel fresh, like it's gonna make you that much better. And I know the skill aspect and all of that, like train fresh and all I get both sides of it. It's just when push comes to shove, especially the older you get, like you have to be able to compete not at your best. And if you've trained not at your best or whatever, or like you say, for instance, your wakeboarder, like she goes in the water sore, like she may not be able to do the elite moves when she's fresh, but she may really be able to focus in on some of the basic stuff, the fundamental stuff that like no matter what, like this is locked in. And maybe it's already like that because she's a world champion. I'm not a world champion in anything, so I can't speak on that, you know what I mean? But at the same time, like naturally as we get older, like we just have to learn to like be not at our best. And that's what sport is, especially at the elite levels. It's a conversation I think probably everybody has had to have. Even like you said, in baseball, when I first got in, it was the same thing. It was like these guys can't be lifting, they can't be bench pressing, they can't be doing any of this stuff. And now it's like if you don't train, you're like the outlier, you know what I mean? If you're not in the gym and I mean front offices are encouraging it, pitching coaches, hitting coaches, they're encouraging it. Like it's that next wave of players that are coming up that are kind of pushing, I don't want to say the old school minds out, but like it's just a new way of thinking, which isn't good or bad. It's just different. And athletes have to really adapt to that. So I was curious if like that was especially true for you with some of the athletes that you see. I'm sure the other thing too with a lot of those athletes is like they don't want to put weight on. I think that's like from my own experience in the climbing gym, the limited amount of time. Like I'm 50 pounds heavier than anybody in there at any given time. And it's like, if I put even 5 more pounds on, like that's a lot of weight to be carrying when I'm on the walls. So like I look around, I'm like, of course these people are 160 pounds. Like they don't want to bulk up because then they have more weight to carry when they're on the walls. But strength training could probably help them even at their current weight. So I figured it was probably like that for you. The one thing you mentioned earlier that I don't want to go by the wayside is the work life balance. Like, what are you doing now that you actually have some free time instead of selling your soul to the game of baseball?
That's been a tough transition for me. Uh, Maybe I just became addicted to it because you always have something to do, and so you don't have to really think about it.
Hmm.
Um, Saturday morning, I'm waking up, I'm going to the complex. It's just what I do.
Hmm.
And then when I get home, it's great. Like I just relax, and I have about 12 hours on Sunday to do whatever I want, and then I'm back in on Monday. So coming here where we're working 9 to 5, uh, um, loosely, and you get weekends off and you get PTO, it's like a completely different world. I mean, I think the first month here, I was like, am I doing something wrong? I feel like I have way too much time on my hands. Should I read a book, or should I don't know. Like I had to really work to find um projects to do. So like my nerd project was continuing to dive into coding and to get better at that, so that we could better use a lot of the data and the sports science stuff that we're collecting. But then I was able to start surfing a couple times a week, which used to be like I'd get 1 or 2 weeks of the off season, surf 4 or 5 times a year, and call it a good year and see you next January. Um, and now like started cycling and mountain biking too. So what used to be me like in the gym 5 or 6 days a week, I'm now in the gym 3 to 4 days a week, but much less. And I'm outside a lot more, hanging out with friends and family and doing more activities, going and seeing things, and really kind of just catching up on a lot of the stuff that being in baseball doesn't allow you to attend.
Yeah, it's I'm like laughing. All of the people that I've talked to that have gotten out of the game are like, dude, I didn't know how to use PTO. Like I felt guilty about taking time off. And it's my wife is really good at like keeping me level and like keeping things in perspective for me. And she's like, it's okay to not do anything on the weekend. Like it's okay to just chill, or like we can go to the park if you want. Like you don't have to look at your phone. Like you don't have to check your email. And I think that's why I've really like gravitated to rock climbing so much, is like when I go to the gym, I'm just there and I'm just hanging out and doing the walls and I'm watching other people do the walls and I'm like really fascinated by how well they do them. And then I want to try to do them. And it's just something different than baseball. I don't have to worry about somebody calling me or emailing me. I'm just there and I'm just like in the present moment. And I think a lot of the people that I've talked to that have gotten out of the game, really that's kind of the thing for them, is like I'm just I feel weird. I feel like I'm doing something wrong by not being at the facility, but once you get over that hump, it's exactly what you said, is like I'm catching up on so many things that I've missed. Like I'm going to weddings, I'm going to dinner, I'm spending time on the weekends, I'm taking these trips, and like it's something that in baseball, I think, like you said, you're addicted to just like, I know I have to get up. I know I have to go to the complex. I know when I get home, I'm gonna rest. I know when I wake up tomorrow, I'm gonna do the same thing. And like, we almost fear downtime. We almost fear like this time away that ultimately, like, if we can maximize that, it makes us better when we're at work. You know what I mean? Instead of always just pushing at work. It's like, no, you get this little balance and then like you get that itch to go back to work. So it's good that you're like finding that peace and you've gotten over that hump. And it's really, like I said, it's really funny. Everybody I talk to says the same thing. They're like, dude, I didn't know what to do with myself for like the first month. I was so confused. Like, I don't have to go in on Saturday or Sunday. And like, no, you get the whole weekend off, buddy. And it's like, what am I supposed to do? Like, whatever you want. We're not gonna call you. And it's like, whoa. Like, so for me, like I'm glad that you're getting that time. And I've seen your biking videos and stuff. So it's cool that you're like getting outdoors and obviously being on the West Coast, the sun is always up out there. And it just sounds like a good situation for you. So I'm really happy that
Yeah, it
that it
is.
worked out.
The funny thing though, hearing you say something in there was, I think about it now. I am one of the first ones in the morning to work out, and usually one of the last in the afternoon to leave. So it's still like I don't feel good being the first one to leave in the afternoon. Just not in my nature.
Yes,
Uh,
I don't know if we could ever break ourselves fully of that.
yeah,
Um, but at the same time, like you probably look like an absolute superstar there, and you're at like 75% of your baseball
yeah,
capacity. And you're like, this is
yeah,
easy compared to what I used to do.
yeah.
Is there
Uh,
one part of this that you enjoy more than anything else working with the extreme sports athletes? Like we've talked about like diving into new sports, we've talked about the work life balance, we've talked about just, being with a new group of people. Like is there anything that really is like kind of the just the best of the best situation for you in this?
Yeah, I'd say what really was appealing is the ability to come here and work with these sports that don't have established training protocols or programs. So the whole find out what matters part, um, and then trying to measure and change that, like that is exciting. That is fun. Skating, breakdancing, surfing, all these sports are now Olympic sports. So all of a sudden there's this funding and there's this seriousness that's coming with the training. It's becoming legitimized. And so to try to be on the forefront of that and to help these athletes put together a program, and see if it actually improves their performances, that's super fun and exciting. And then just the resources that we have here. So we also don't have the immediacy of having a game every night where they need to produce, or a competition. We can try things. We can have a training block and do different trainings that I never could do in baseball. It's not 3x5 or 3x3, probably not going to get done. Um, so all that stuff that I read about, the periodizations and exploration and really building up an athlete over time, that's been super fun and refreshing.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking about earlier is like I don't know, somebody's going to do like some crazy biking event and it's in 2 months. Like ultimately you have 2 months to get ready for one event versus baseball, like you said, you play every day basically in the big leagues and 6 out of 7 days in the minor leagues. Like I would imagine the training looks really different. And then obviously, like you said, there's a lot of just unknown. So potentially being at the forefront of things. I like I said, I joked earlier about being the sailing coach or whatever I said, but like there's probably some legitimacy to that of like you might be at the forefront of training for breakdancing or skateboarding or windsurfing or paragliding or anything. Like you said, I think the cool thing is that like if it's competitive, like they're going to train, right? And for like ultimately, like if you can find competitive advantages no matter what the sport, like, and you're helping them to succeed, I would imagine that they keep coming back, right?
Yeah, and that's like the big thing too is it's not always a measurable increase or outcome. So for a lot of these athletes, it's getting them to train twice a week, and maybe we're not lifting as heavy as I would like or think that they could, which would benefit them. But we're mixing in a little bit more mobility and some recovery type stuff and just getting them to take care of their body 2 to 3 times a week for 45 minutes to an hour. And all of a sudden they're like, hey, I was able to skate 3 days in a row for the first time in a year. Like my body feels good. Usually I skate 1 or 2 days and I'm crushed. And then I take 2 or 3 days off. But all of a sudden I just feel better. And so for us, it's kind of like availability is the best ability. Um, if they're able to do their sport more often, they're going to have a chance to be more successful. And with a lot of these athletes, success to them are video parts. So they're not going out for competitions and medals. They're trying to go all around the city or backcountry and get a really sweet video part that no one's ever done before that goes viral. And that ensures another couple of years of sponsorship. And so that's like a different side of the coin that I never would have thought of.
Yeah, that leads me strangely to like my next question is just what is the coolest or like most surreal like performance you've seen from one of your athletes? You don't have to give names, if you don't want to give a sport or whatever, but like is there one that when you saw either the video or live you're like holy shit, that's amazing?
So I'd say there two come to mind. The first is I've worked with this kid, or we've worked with this kid that's a multi-time world champion skimboarder. So you know what skimboarding is? Just
Yes, yes, yes.
throw
That one I
down,
do
and
know. Yes.
usually it's into like shore break, so small waves. And he's won that championship a few times. But then over COVID, he's got a buddy who's a big wave surfer. And the guy was like, I think you could probably do that in some big waves. Like, let's tow you in. And so now this kid is going to Nazare and Mavericks and Jaws and skimboarding 60-foot waves. And he's the first person to ever do it on waves that big. And he comes in and he's completely unassuming. And he's just like, yeah, not that big of a deal. It's like, what? That's to me, like, that's completely insane. And then in person, I got to go see a mountain bike event called Rampage, where people are essentially riding down huge cliffs in the middle of Utah. They're like ski-sized jumps, and they're riding down on their bikes at 35 miles per hour, jumping over canyons and doing front flips. And seeing that in person was a completely surreal experience.
Yeah, I think that would be so cool. Is like I feel like if you see a football player, basketball player, even like a hockey player, baseball player, like if you see them out in public, you would probably guess that like that person plays some sort of sport, right? Like they have this certain like physically like athletic look to them. But I feel like if you see some of the athletes that you're working with, you'd have no idea outside like how amazing some of the stuff is. And then like you said, the kids like, it was okay. Like one of our athletes had recommended to me Free Solo, the movie about the rock climbing, the solo climbing, and I watched it and I was like, this is the like I can't even fathom this in my mind. And then he gets to the top of the mountain, not to ruin the movie if nobody's seen it, and he's just like, yeah, that was cool. And like he's like, I feel like I might cry. I'm that emotional. And I'm like, dude, like what? Like I can't like it doesn't work in my brain to like figure that out. And like you just did this in like under 4 hours, which is like, back before the pitch clocks, like that's a baseball game. You climb this entire mountain without anything. And I'm like, these guys are crazy. These athletes are so cool. And it's really opened my eyes. Like I said, I'm really gravitating towards the climbing of just there's such a different world of what athleticism is compared to what we've seen in the baseball world. I don't want to speak for you, but just from my own experience of like over the last almost 10 years, is like there's a certain definition of athleticism in baseball. And then you step back and you step into a different world and you're like, no, that's athletic. Like that is freakish. Like these people, not only like the way they move their bodies, but mentally to go through that and like jump over a canyon on a bike, like to have like the mental fortitude to do that and then just be like, "Nah, it was okay." Like, what's my next one? It's like that takes a special type of person.
Well, I was talking to one of our skiers about it, and he said when he gets in the zone, he can go hit a jump or a gap, flip it, and land completely on pitch, right at the right distance, right speed, everything. It just is like natural. He's like, I don't know what it is. He goes, I would say it's like the same as, like a basketball player. He can shoot from anywhere on the court. Steph Curry can drain a shot. He's never shot before just because he has this innate feel for the ball and where the hoop is in relation to where he is. And so they, over years and years of practice, create that same feeling, which is pretty cool. And then the funny thing is, you'll have skiers and snowboarders talking to big wave surfers, and the skier will be like, dude, how do you surf that? That is insane. And the kid's like, well, it's not that bad. Like when you fall, it's just in water and you hold your breath. He's like, but what you do, he's like, that's a massive jump. Like you're flying 50 feet in the air. The guy's like, yeah, it's not that bad. It's on snow. And so like they all have this way of rationalizing, like, oh, it's not that bad.
Yeah, I've had like I said, I've posted some of my climbing videos with myself, my wife, my brother, and like again, I'm not very good. Admittedly, I'm not very good. And some of our guys have seen it and like, dude, that's so cool that you're doing that. I'm like, well, first of all, you should see the 7-year-old in the gym that's absolutely dominating me on these walls. And second, like you throw 95. Like, you know how many people on this planet throw 95? Not very many. And they're like, nah, it's just throwing the ball. And I'm like, no, like, how can you be so impressed with these things I'm doing? And like, I'm sitting here like, I can't even fathom throwing a ball that hard. And you're just like, nah, whatever. So it's,
Right.
I don't know, man, performance is so cool. And like, high level athletes are so cool. That's why I really like, I enjoy these kind of conversations. It's just talking with good people that are training other athletes that are around in the performance world that just see a different side of it. And for me, it's been really cool to like even from afar see it and then to hear some of your story with it. And before I let you go, is there anything that we missed? Anything exciting that you got coming up, or anything along those lines?
Well, I'd go back to the mental aspect of it that you mentioned. So I came in here thinking about a lot of that, having surfed and biked a lot myself. And I'm like, okay, I wonder what these athletes are like, and I can't wait to talk to them. And you talk to them in the gym, and they're like, yeah, I don't really have a routine. I know what my line's going to be, and I just go hit it. And like, that doesn't sound right. And then you get to see them in competition, or you see some video of behind the scenes, and they're at the top, and they're taking big, deep breaths, and they're like, okay, you can do this. You got this. All right. Drop in, bank left, break, spin. Okay. This drop. Like they have the entire thing memorized. They know exactly what they're doing when. Talk to a big wave surfer, same way. It was like talking to a starting pitcher. He's like, everything I do is calculated. I know the water temperature, the wind, the swell. I know the size of the wave, the speed of the wave. Everything goes into writing it at that moment. I'm like, okay, that's what I'm looking at. Like, there is that elite level of focus and dedication to the craft that they've all mastered, whether they know how to talk about it or not. And to me, that's what I really love about working with athletes is like seeing the process about how they do what they do.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like my ultimate like striving point in my life, career wise, is just that pursuit of high performance for people, whatever that means, quote unquote performance, but just the epitome of what it takes to be at the top of the top. I think there's so many people that are like, this guy can't even throw a strike. I could do that. And it's like, you can't. You actually cannot. You have no idea. And like every athlete you talk to, a lot of them are knuckleheads, but in their own ways, but they're geniuses in one way or the other in their own craft, in their own sport, in their own understanding of their body and what it takes to succeed on a stage that just frankly not many people are ever going to get to. They're just not. And I think there's a lot of like trying to create athletes nowadays and like create what it takes to like be a big leaguer or be a big wave surfer or whatever it is. But like there are certain traits, especially on that mental side, that like I don't know if you can ever learn those. And even if you have everything right, like I just don't know if you can get to that level. I'm not sure, but I'm on the pursuit of trying to figure it out if I can or not.
Yeah, I've got one last point on that. So we've got this house where the athletes can stay if they're in town and free room and board. And so one of them was there staying. There was a video gamer staying with a skateboarder. And I was talking to the gamer the next day, and he's like, man, it's so cool. So and so was telling me that he just taught himself everything he knows. He's never had a skateboard coach or anything. He just taught it all himself. I'm like, well, yeah, but like, you're a professional gamer. Like, did anyone teach you? Like, no. I'm like, so how'd you get good? You just gamed like 5 to 6 hours a day, right? He's like, yeah. I'm like, he just did the same, but skateboarding. And he's like, oh, yeah, I guess you're right. So like really, it just comes down to time. Like all these athletes just put in the time, put in the effort. If they don't get it, they just try again and again and again. And if it takes them 4 or 5 hours and they get it once, they're good and then they go home. But like their dedication and their passion, I guess you could say, for getting that trick, that's what separates them.
Yeah, I think it's the unwavering commitment to doing something right. Like you talk like the 10,000 hour rule, like whether you agree, disagree, like I think the missing piece of that is like those 10,000 hours have to be like you have to believe so fully in that what you're doing is right and be so committed to it. Like, you can check the box for 10,000 hours, or you can like really be locked in for those 10,000 hours. And like, not every hour is the same. Like, you talk about if you game for 5 to 6 hours, like I might play FIFA mindlessly for 5 hours. I don't, but I'm saying if I did, or if I was like playing FIFA 5 hours to try to like be the best in the world, like I might take it all the way and then I might not. I don't, what I mean? But if you don't believe in it and you're not committed to it, like the level of commitment it takes to get to the top of the top is just, something that most people just don't have in them, I don't think. And it goes the same for coaches too. I think coaching, I think whether you're an athletic trainer, you're a mental skills specialist, you're a nutritionist, like to get to the top of the top, and this from being in professional baseball as well, like the level of commitment, the level of sacrifice is something that a lot of people will never fully grasp. And I think it in general, like with fitness, with health, like takes effort to make change. And I'm not sure people are willing to put that much amount of effort in for that little bit of change. And, I was listening to the functional range conditioning podcast, whatever they call it, this morning, actually, and they were talking about just the level it takes to like really disrupt the body to cause change is something that most people either go at wholeheartedly and then it gets hard and then they're done, or like they make their newbie gains and then to get another 5 pounds on their deadlift, or to surf the next biggest wave, like it takes a real big commitment. Like I just don't know if that's in there for everyone. Like I don't know if it's something you can learn, it's something from birth. I don't know, but I'm on the pursuit of finding it. So I don't want to take any more of your time. I know you got to get going. You got other things with work, but I appreciate your openness. I appreciate hearing about working with the extreme sport athletes, and I'm excited to continue seeing you to get out on your bike as well and, and enjoy being away from work also. But the work that you're doing as well, I think it's really cool just to know that, there's a whole other world out there that's essentially untapped in a lot of ways.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. It's always scary to think about what's on the other side. Um, but kind of like with anything, you got to get past that comfort zone to really find the next step. So, um, just got to be willing to take that risk.
Agreed. Well, it's been good catching up, man. We'll definitely catch up again soon. Enjoy the nice weather out there while we're getting hit with snow up in the Northeast. And we'll talk soon, my friend.
All right, Chris, sounds good, man.